Hey there, party people. How are you on this Tuesday, August 4th at 12 p.m. Standard Time in the Pacific region, or possibly 3 p.m. if you're on the East Coast and all the hours in between?
Or normal time in Arizona.
Yeah.
Super awesome.
I know, like, there's now a bill that Congress is trying to pass that is going to make
What's up,
uh
Senko?
it's going to make daylight savings time permanent, but that is a horrible idea.
Yeah, it's the opposite route that they should be taking.
Yeah. Standard time all day, every day. People should know this. Otherwise, it's going to be dark until 9 a.m. in the wintertime if it's daylight savings all the time. So stupid. People are stupid. Everyone's stupid. But we're
Maybe we
not
should just have
stupid.
universal Earth time.
Yeah. No kidding. Let's just. I feel like
anyway,
that's Star
speaking
Trek
of time
comment.
and the passage of time.
Yay. Have you just recently purchased that, or did you already have it?
I did. I purchased it just for this. I actually haven't seen this movie in over a decade. I saw it in the theater when it, well, I guess more than a decade, because I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I don't know that I've seen the full thing since.
Yeah, I don't think I saw it in the theater, to be honest, but I did see it soon after on home video in some form.
I did. It's actually one of the few times that I cried in a theater. The ending to this movie gets me every time. Every time.
Yeah. So what's your rating then? Let's start with that.
Rating right off the bat, I'm going to say 8.5 out of 10. I not only do I really, really enjoy this movie, I think it's one of Tim Burton's best, in my opinion. I have my favorite, like, fantastical ones, but in terms of just like a normal movie that, you know, tells a story, has a theme, this one is up there. I really, really like it. Most of my criticisms are kind of like with some of the other ones that we've watched recently, where I feel like the technological reach exceeded the grasp, or maybe flip that, reverse it. They set out to do more than was possible at the time with some of the technology.
Yeah.
There's some really good scenes, there's some really cool stuff, but my criticisms of the movie are mostly in that there's like a few moments that I'm taken out of it because of over reliance on some visual effects. Yeah. Steve Norrie, welcome to the live stream. Yes, great movie, and you could totally see it. In fact, if you go to Google Maps and search up the town of Spectre, Alabama, it will pull up that island, even though the town is not actually a registered location in Alabama.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, the Google Earth view is actually pretty awesome too.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched this in chunks because I had to, because I had various things I was doing over the weekend.
How dare you have a life outside of this?
Sorry. But I think, I don't know, maybe because I watched it in chunks, like I literally watched it over 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And maybe because I had to break it up, it really didn't have the impact that I thought it would. Because I don't know, it just seemed a little disjointed, but it's probably because I watched it disjointedly. So, having to start and stop. In fact, because my brother-in-law has this on his Plex server, but for whatever reason, his internet, he said, was being weird. So every time I would press play on it, it would just be a black screen and nothing.
Oh, so you just watched black the whole time? Just a black screen?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably why I don't have a very good rating. But I rented it on Fandango at home, but I totally forgot that you have to watch it within 48 hours. So I'm starting to watch it. I wanted to finish it because I only had maybe like 30 minutes left on Monday, and I was starting to watch it, and it was like on for like 2 minutes, then all of a sudden it errored
It
out.
just dropped you? Oh,
Yeah,
wow. I don't
yeah,
rent very many movies. I buy them through Fandango or iTunes all the time, but I
yeah.
don't rent very many of them. I thought that as long as you started the movie before it expired, that it would let you finish it. Wow. Really? It just bombs out if you're
Yeah, it just
like a
bombed me
hard
out, and
cutoff.
then as soon as I went back into the main screen of Big Fish, it's like $3.99 to rent it again. I'm like,
That's a
but
travesty.
luckily it was on Tubi. So you've got ads every once in a
Boo.
while, intermittently. So I just finished it that way on Tubi. Because I didn't want to rent it again. That would just be
Yeah.
silly. Um, so yeah, because of that, yeah, I think I just kind of shot myself in the foot because, um, I really like how it kind of unfolds in the third act and how the son is finally starting to realize that it probably wasn't all fabricated, all the stories that his father told him throughout the years.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, like, yeah, it didn't really grasp me in the way that I thought it would, just
Hmm.
because it is the least Tim Burton film of his filmography.
Yeah.
Because
It's funny
even
because
the go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's funny you say that because in the commentary he talks about how the movie like really is close to home for him because his
Mm.
father died shortly before they filmed the movie. Like before he got asked to do it, it had been like less than 3 months since his own father had died. So he feels like he kind of
Whoa.
poured a lot of himself into it. So it's funny that you
Yeah.
say that it's not it's the and I agree with you. It is kind of the least Tim Burton-y of the movie because most of his movies are completely fantastical, and this one is kind of like very unique in that there's fantastical elements to it, but they're kind of buttressed by stuff that's supposed to be happening in real life that is uh you know it's real life stuff that's happening to the main character with his father
Right.
in today's times and all the stories going talking about the past.
Yeah. I mean, even because right off the bat, if you know the Tim Burton, Danny Elfman duo that
Hmm.
has been, since Pee Wee's Big Adventure, um, Danny Elfman obviously has this very unique style
Hmm.
that you can recognize pretty quickly if you listen to movie soundtracks or care about them. And even then, like the opening credits and the very beginning of the film, I even had to look it up. I was like, did Danny Elfman do the music for this? And sure enough, he did. But even then, I saw comments on that, even with Tim Burton taking a slight departure of what he normally does. Same thing with Danny Elfman. He took a slight departure and made it a little more romantic, a little more fantastical, a little more. I mean, Edward Scissorhands is still very fairy tale, but it's still very Danny Elfman. And this was just, it seemed a little more mainstream fairy
Yeah.
tale. But it's not that I disliked it. I still thought it was a wonderful soundtrack from Danny Elfman, and I think he even got nominated for an Oscar for it, if I believe. I don't think he won, but he got nominated.
Nice.
So yeah, just all that's why I wanted to revisit this one, because so many people who just have this very blunt signature style just decided to kind of tone it down for this one and go a slightly different direction. And yeah, it was pretty cool to see that. I do have to comment that even though this is um, not as weird as a lot of Tim Burton's filmography, I do appreciate the fact that he still takes the time to kind of put a spotlight on strange, unique, amazing people at the same time.
Hmm.
Like the actor who plays the giant.
Hmm.
I mean, clearly he's just this weird looking dude who's gigantic and speaks really weird, and obviously because of his gigantism or acromegaly or whatever he's suffering from, like he's got like a spine that's definitely malformed. But I applaud, just in general, I applaud Tim Burton shining a spotlight on the bizarre and the weird and how cool it can be. And just to stay weird, like don't shy away from your weird,
Very
because
Pee-wee. Be
yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
Yeah. No matter
So
what.
like I even though this particular movie didn't like totally grasp me like I thought it would, I still really love how Tim Burton is just um unabashedly himself in no matter what he does, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care
Mhm.
what other people think. He's like, "Yeah, dude, I'm a weird dude. I'm going to make weird things, and that's that. Like you can't stop me." So,
Yeah, that's kind of what I love about the whole Tim Burton story. Like Brad and I kind of talked about this with regards to Pee-wee because, during our stream, our double take stream with me and Brad, I asked him, what he thought the themes of Pee-wee were and things like that, and he thought he didn't think that the movie was that deep, that there was really like a message kind of underlying it.
mm,
And I feel like so I'm kind of on the opposite of you, I guess, a little bit. Is I'm glad that Tim Burton made the choice to have the scene set in real life be non-Tim Burton-y and to keep the fantasy stuff, because I don't think that the message of this movie, to me at least, would have been as effective if the real life scenes also had that fantastical Tim Burton quality to
yeah.
them.
Mhm.
Even like when you think about the town of Spectre, to me anyway, when I see the movie kind of, and maybe this is why the disjointedness was a little different for you, but seeing it all the way through, to me, Spectre very much represents a person's view on the concept of death. So
Mm.
every time that Ewan McGregor's character, visits the town, at the different points of it, like when you're young, when you're a younger person, like, they even say like, oh, you're early, you're not supposed to be here yet. Like that to
Mhm.
me is very much like something happened to him. He got into an accident or whatever, and it's death. He's for the first time in his life confronting what the idea of death is. And
Mhm.
it doesn't really it doesn't really mean that much to him. He doesn't have that much to lose. He hasn't started a family yet. He doesn't have, any of that other stuff. And then later on in life, he comes back to the town and it's been just pretty much kind of decimated. It's a drab,
Yeah.
dreary place. And that's kind of how adults view the concept of death, so that like, even though he doesn't explicitly like point that stuff out, that stuff is very like fantastically done to, in my opinion, talk about the theme of death. And
Mhm.
then you have the real life stuff that could I think, very benefit a lot from a fantastical viewpoint on death. And it's really just a son trying to kind of at some point connect with his father before death comes. And the real life view is like way more cynical. Like it's
Yeah.
despite the cynicism present in the fantastical version of it, like this like, I'm never going to know who my father is. I'm never really going to know where I came from or whatever. And it's mostly just because he wants, which I think is the theme of the entire movie, is like he wants to know his dad, but it's like, what makes a person, what makes a man or a woman, but in this case a man, what makes a man who he is it the stories that he tells, or is it the facts that make up who that person is throughout their life? And I think the movie kind of, with that juxtaposition, kind of puts it in your hands a little bit at the end of the movie, is that it's like it's kind of for each person to decide what does another person mean to them, and what does one's life mean to themselves. Is it the stories we tell ourselves, or is it the facts of what happened to us that make us who we are? And I think it strikes a nice little balance between those two things to kind of say that it matter, you know, it's different for everybody. It doesn't matter to everybody else what your life means to you, but it might mean something to your children, or it might mean something to the other
Mhm.
people in your life. Like, I love the scene, kind of like you mentioned, how when his mom is like digging through some old stuff and she's like, "Oh, this is the letter that we got when they thought your father was dead before they, realized that he hadn't actually died in the war or whatever." And the son is like, Billy Crudup's character is like, "Wait, that part was real?" Like,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Yeah, not everything your father tells, or not every story your father tells is completely fantastical," or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's like that to me is the message of the movie, is like, you can make it as much or as little as you want, because at the end of the day, when people stop telling stories about you, that's really when you die.
Yeah. I know, because it just makes you think about all the various stories that I've heard from my own father growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, obviously I wasn't there, so I have to trust him and I have to
Mm-hmm.
believe that what he is conveying is actually how it happened in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But really, is it? I mean, like,
Yeah.
because I don't I don't think my dad, made up these stories, at least to this degree, as it's at least portrayed in this particular film. But yeah, I mean, it's that, just legends passed down, from generation to generation. That's really the only way that I know my father's past. Um,
Well,
because
even
I've
yourself, though, think about like what stories you tell other people about your life, and how
mhm,
much of those stories are like completely 100% real and accurate, and how much the people that you're telling the story to like fill in the details of that. Like, Kelly was making fun of me because when I first moved away from Michigan, I was born in Michigan and I was going to school up in the Upper Peninsula. This is our Michigan map. So up in the Upper Peninsula, and
yeah,
people tell me like, "Well, why did you leave Michigan?" Or they ask like, "How did you end up in Arizona?" And the story that I always tell, that as far as I'm concerned is 100% accurate. Our summer break from school started May 13th, and it snowed 18 inches. And I can only imagine what people like picture in their heads when I tell that story. And my wife, was we were watching the movie, was kind of like, "I've heard you tell that story like a million times to people, that every time, why did you move from Michigan? How did you end up in Arizona? Whatever." And she says that the story in her head gets kind of more fantastical every time I tell it, that, like
mm,
I had to walk uphill in the snowstorm both ways or whatever. When the
yeah,
reality of it was probably more so like I was packing all my shit up in the car. It started snowing. We left and started driving back down to the rest of Michigan, to civilization. And I'm sure I read somewhere afterwards that the total amount of snow was like 18 inches. But it's not
yeah,
like I was packing up my car in a snowdrift, with the
right,
snow going past my head or whatever, whatever it is. And it's like, I keep thinking about that, about her comment from that. Or kept thinking about it through the end of the movie, and even now, like trying to process the movie. And I watched it with the commentary. I watched a bunch of behind the scenes, and all I can think about is like, yeah, that quote, whatever, however cliche it comes off, but there's a quote that every man dies twice. You die once when your physical body, leaves this earth, and then you die again when people forget, when the last person forgets you, I think is what it is. And
hmm
it's really like this movie kind of drives that point home of like, there's so much of what we tell ourselves and what we tell other people that really is not factual, but how much of that matters, how much of the facts matter. And I also think that it's kind of a case for memes, like people share gifs all the time of stuff. You send gifts to your friends, you'll say something and then send a gif to accompany it or whatever.
hmm
And I think more so than anything, the thing that I appreciate about this movie and about that kind of thinking is it's really about the vibes. Like we send we send memes to people, we send gifts to people and things like that, not because the content itself of the meme is like funny, but because
hmm
it gives you, in a text-based medium, it gives you a way to communicate more than just emoji or whatever, about what you mean, what vibe you're going for when you're telling somebody something. And that's how I kind of view these stories that we tell ourselves, that we still tell other people, that other people tell us. It's like, it's less so about getting the facts of the situation, unless you're disputing a fact or something. But in most cases, when you're telling a story like that, it's not about the facts, it's about
yeah,
what the feeling is. Like if I tell a story about when I was a kid, And to the movie's point, the giant man that I met was 12 feet tall. I mean, there's literally a
Mhm.
shot of people like in the circus, they're in the bleachers, and the dude is like towering over the bleachers. And then you see him at the end of the movie, and yeah, was he tall? Sure. Was he
Yeah.
12 feet tall? No, not
No.
really. But which makes for a more meaningful point, like which gets the point across of how he felt as a kid. The 12-foot version or the 7'3" version, or
Yeah.
the 12-foot version.
Yeah. But when you're that small,
Yeah.
7 feet probably feels like 12 feet.
Yeah, exactly. All the
Yeah.
cheating angles, of shooting it
Mhm.
very low, the witch, that
Yeah.
whole story of being able to see how you die. I don't know. It just the whole thing is kind of cool and fantastical, and I love it.
I love how Spectre, it kind of reminds me of just how cookie cutter and um like pastel colors and just how
Oh, it's almost all white.
well
Like,
I
yeah,
mean
pastel
like
colors, but
pastel colors from the town in Edward Scissorhands.
mm-hmm.
How everything is just perfect, lawns are perfect, it's just suburbia in its
Mm-hmm.
purest form. So I like how Spectre is kind of that, a nod to that, how it's just, this deep, dark woods that are kind of scary and trees are attacking you. But once he comes out of it, then he comes to this place with lush green, you know, lawns
Yeah. Well,
and
more so
everything.
than that, there's literally no road for the first,
Right.
encounter with it. It's a city built on grass, which is like,
Yeah.
what?
Right. I know, man. It's yeah, because again, it's just I love how Tim Burton loves to dip into both of those
Mm-hmm.
uh, polar opposites, where it's
Mm-hmm.
just dark and scary and brooding, but here's also this glowing, fantastical, amazing place that
That everybody's
seems
barefoot.
like right, just seems like paradise, basically,
Yeah.
some sort
Well,
of oasis in this forest.
and that's another reason why I felt like it served as an allegory for not death itself, but like how one views death at like various stages in their lives. Because
Mhm.
the concept of dying, much like that little walk through the forest on that separate path, is scary. It's
Yeah.
something that you have to think about, you have to confront on your own. Nobody's going to help you, um, you know, get over or kind of form your thoughts on death. It's something that you have to do on your own. But then when we tell stories about like religion and every religion has some kind of story about a utopia or a garden or a place that is like above us. Even old Greek mythology talked about Mount Olympus that was so far above us because it was like, this beautiful paradise that all the gods lived in or whatever. And Spectre kind of serves that purpose or whatever. But then at the same time, it's kind of like you said, everybody's the same there. Everybody's, all of it kind of feels the same. And then you have even Steve Buscemi's character, who's like the poet, who, much like um, Ewan McGregor's character, Ed, he he's not as good as telling those stories, or like weaving that in with words. And I love the scene where he's like surrounded by all those women and he's still just got those three friggin' lines written down and he can't really put into words what it means. And it just kind of like makes me think about, again, the concepts of death, concepts of life, why that
Mhm.
dichotomy, why the light, why the dark. And I love
Yeah.
that Tim Burton, no matter what, is very purposeful and very thoughtful in all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Would this be how would this rank with in your mind with other Tim Burton movies?
Um, well, that's hard to say. I think it ranks higher than most of them. I agree with our chat comment here from Kadur Kadurdima. Kadurdima.
Yeah.
That I don't think it gets the love it deserves. I like it a lot. It doesn't quite reach the heights of something like Nightmare Before Christmas or Beetlejuice or Edward
Mhm.
Scissorhands, because to me Tim Burton's best work is in that fantastical, worldview. Like,
Yeah.
well, the thing that I appreciate the most about Tim Burton is his view on the world and his view on life. And I think that the messages that he tries to put across make more sense when it's told in that fantastical lens. Like one of the things that I told Brad is that as I was watching Tim Pee-wee,
Hmm.
from the lens of Tim Burton, we watched an interview, Kelly and I, from I think when Wednesday was airing and Netflix
Yeah.
was putting out like some supplemental material for it or whatever. And in the interview, he talked about how, when he looks at Wednesday, he very much views himself as like a loner. When he was a kid, drawing all these crazy dark things, like people looked at him like a weirdo, kind of like what you were saying earlier, like be weird. Well, yeah, he was weird and people didn't
Hmm.
like him for it.
Yeah.
And so Pee-wee is kind of like his version of the weirdo that everybody loves. Everybody wants to be Pee-wee's friends, even though nothing about him or as a person or as an individual makes any sense whatsoever.
Right.
Everybody wants to be Pee-wee's friend, and he kind of has like this childlike wonder to him. And I see a lot of that too in the other, Tim Burton stuff is he is almost like a self-insert for Beetlejuice, for Pee-wee, for some of these other movies that he has. And the fact that Big Fish plays so much in the real world almost like does Tim Burton a disservice. I love the
Yeah.
fact that he did it, but it's not Tim Burton's best work because of
Hmm.
that. As far as a movie, I love it. I think Tim Burton is the reason why this movie is so successful. It's because it tells the regular world, it's again very much like Pee-wee, except in terms of where Pee-wee lives as a fantastical imp in a real world.
Hmm.
This makes a very clear distinction between the real world and the fantastical world.
Yeah.
And so it's like a unique take on it, which makes it go, shoot up the rankings. But in terms of like a Tim Burton vehicle, his best work is when it's fantastical. So it's hard for me to say that it's, like it's better than his Alice in Wonderland. It's better than Sweeney Todd, in my opinion.
Hmm.
There's a lot of those films that he kind of like took over in that regard that are fantastical, but I think it ranks higher than that as a film because it's a better film than some of those other ones.
Yeah. I feel like the Tim Burton films that really resonate with me are the ones that he himself created the story as well,
Yeah,
instead of just adapting a story that already exists and just put his own spin on it, like Alice in Wonderland.
yeah, very much
Um,
so.
yeah, because I adore Edward Scissorhands.
Hmm.
That's probably my number one of his. Not just the film itself, but it's also one of my favorite scores from Danny Elfman as well. So those two things combined just have it way up there in my own personal opinion.
Yeah, for similar reasons, mine would probably be Nightmare Before Christmas is up at the top of
Mhm.
my list, because of the fact that, again, it not being centered in the real world at all
Yeah.
really, really lets him drive that home. Danny Elfman's scores, songs, voice, music, everything just tops that off. Beetlejuice is probably second, and then Edward Scissorhands is probably my third. I do
Mhm.
love, to Cinco's point, Batman. Um, I, I don't know. I don't know that I can objectively say that Big Fish is better or worse than Batman because Batman has major nostalgia for me that I think colors that.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I'd probably put Batman even higher than Big Fish, but I don't think as a movie itself or as like a character itself. Um, I don't know. I don't know how much Batman benefits from the Tim Burton lens. Batman Returns definitely, because I think
Mhm.
Danny DeVito's Penguin and Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman are like such good takes on those characters. Whereas
Yeah.
Batman, he really played into the loner version of that character and the
Mhm.
isolationism of what it's like to be Batman. So it's a little weird. Batman just in general is a hard character, I think, because the comic books have taken so many different views on Batman, and then movies take other, like a lot of people. It's like when people ask, if you ask Superman slash Clark Kent what his name is,
Mhm.
it's like that scene in Kill Bill or whatever. Is he Superman? Because he was born Kal-El, but he became Clark Kent because of his upbringing and that whole nature versus nurture thing. Well, Batman is kind of the same thing. Is Batman, does he view himself when he thinks about himself? Is he Batman? Because in the comic books, yes. When Bruce Wayne thinks about himself, he calls himself in his head Batman. Other people call him Bruce, but he thinks of himself as Batman. And I think
Mhm.
that Tim Burton kind of like he took that approach, but then also made it as like that there's not really any redemption for Bruce Wayne in that, and the comics kind of take the opposite. Is like he thinks of himself as Batman, but deep down underneath everything, the only thing that makes Batman work is the fact that it's Bruce Wayne under the cowl. So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's my ranking. Big Fish is below most of those movies, but it's above, I would say, something like Frankenweenie or Mars Attacks, Ed Wood, even Planet of
Mhm.
the Apes. I actually really, I think I'm one of the few people that likes Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes.
Mhm.
It gets shit on a lot, justifiably
Yeah.
so, because of Mark Wahlberg, but I
Yeah.
really like the Tim Burton kind of aesthetic of that movie, even though it's not as, again, high as some of these other movies.
Mhm.
Even Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, like you and I think talked about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for a little bit, or maybe it was Brad. But I
I think it
loved
was
Charlie
Brad,
and the
yeah.
Chocolate Factory. I don't think it's fair to compare Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory
Oh, for
directly.
sure.
But again, a lot of what I loved about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is Danny Elfman, is the art style, is it's the same story we've seen and heard in other places, but it's like stylistically a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think I do credit Tim Burton definitely for, it's like starting the whole interest in comic book characters on the big screen. I mean, there was Superman and that it was definitely very popular, but, it was still, uh, I don't know, like, it was the first time that something very dark and brooding surrounding a comic book character was ever presented on the big screen, because Superman with Christopher Reeves was very campy, and it you know the villains were very out of this world and over the top.
Hmm.
But I mean, Jack Nicholson's Joker was also just equally formidable compared to, you know, the hero trying to save the day with, Michael Keaton as Batman. Um, but yeah, it just kind of snowballed, and people were all of a sudden interested. Like, oh, well, you can do this with a comic book character. like,
Hmm.
like nobody really imagined it was possible until Tim Burton decided to do it. So, and then it just kind of, yeah, just kind of went from there. And then everybody started to try and do more and more comic book stuff, to varying degrees of success. but
Yeah.
I don't think, Marvel's Iron Man with John Favreau directing, I don't think that could have been possible without Tim Burton's Batman.
Oh, I don't think
Um,
Christopher Nolan's Batman movies could have
mhm,
been like, or would have been what they are if it wasn't for Tim Burton. Because again,
yeah,
even outside of the kind of like fantastical versions of Penguin and Joker and Catwoman and all that, they obviously went more campy once Joel Schumacher kind of took over the reins.
yeah,
But the the fact that Tim Burton managed to like again make it fantastical while also grounding it in like real human emotions and motivations. Like
mhm,
Joker isn't just a Joker because he's a silly person. Like it's trauma, it's all this, like backstory to him in the Tim Burton movie. I think like the Adam West Batman films or whatever,
yeah,
and those are like super campy and crazy because they're kind of characters for the sake of being characters. And
yeah,
Tim Burton doesn't really do that. Tim Burton is like, yeah, they're crazy, they're fantastical, but there's still a place that you can relate to them in a weird, kind of way. And that's what I mean by like leaning into the idea of Batman as a loner. Like Penguin, the whole story of Penguin in Batman Returns is that he is literally one of a kind. He is this
Mhm.
unique creature, monster person who was so reviled that even his parents didn't love him.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Can we relate to a character like that? And it's like, yeah, I think everybody has that loneliness or isolationism or whatever that they feel at some point in their life. Well, this character, that's his whole life. So like,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like a toss it to the audience. Now talk amongst yourselves, like
Right.
figure that out. What does that kind of thing mean to you?
Yeah, man. Um, what was your favorite part of Big Fish?
Ooh, there was a couple parts that I really, really enjoyed. Some of the more like silly stuff that I think again, I appreciated, was like the scene where the giant guy straightens out Jenny's house.
Yeah.
Like, for whatever reason, that stood out to me because when he like enters the house, like the door frame is like crooked, but it's not,
Mhm.
like it's not crooked because it fell over. It's crooked because it was designed crooked. Like
Right.
it plays into the more fantastical stuff, but like literally the door is not, it's not a rectangle, it's a parallelogram or whatever. Like it's
Mhm.
I forget what the geometric term for it is. So like even him pushing the house over wouldn't have fixed the shape of the door, But
Right.
like as you're watching it, it's kind of just like, oh yeah, hey, that's pretty clever. That's pretty funny. So I liked stuff like that. I really liked, and again, uh, it's one of the scenes that I ding the movie for, despite the fact that I love it so much. But the scene where time stops at the circus, just the CG in that scene took me out of it for a hot second. But I love I love what it's trying to say in that moment as he
Yeah.
like walks up to her and is, because that's what it feels like to see somebody that the concept of love at first sight. That's what it
Mhm.
feels like. The vibe of that is so perfect. And I wish that if they had better CG or better technology at the time, maybe they could have nailed that a little bit more. Even the scene right before that where he's sticking his head in the lion's maw and is kind of like you can tell it's an animatronic lion, and then they kind of quickly
Yeah.
cut to the real thing, but it takes you out of it a little bit. But those kinds of scenes I really, really liked. I loved the Spectre scenes. Those are really fun. Um, yeah. But I think that those two are my favorites, is the straightening of the house and then the circus.
Yeah, I mean, that's also my favorite scene is time stopping.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like, 'cause I really enjoy the concept of him having to move the popcorn out of the
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
and then as he's going forward, it hits his chest and falls down.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, it's obviously very dated on how that was executed. Um, so
And there's a
yeah.
bunch of scenes in the movie that are like that. Like I liked, or shots I should say, not scenes, because that's the only scene that's like my favorite scene. But there's like shots like when Danny DeVito's character, the ringmaster, is in the
Mhm.
trailer and he's about to turn into the wolf or whatever. Like I love the shot of Deep Roy coming out and opening his stomach to have like a gun with one single silver bullet in there,
Right.
like that's a really cool shot. And I just wish that scene had played that whole thing better, because then that might be one of my
Mhm.
favorite scenes. But it's not. It's like that one part of that scene is the best part of the whole scene, whereas the circus
Yeah.
scene as a whole, I think I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too. And again, just the fact that a circus is even involved in this story
Mm-hmm.
is very Tim Burton. Again,
Mm-hmm.
leaning on weirdos and
Yeah.
people who are thought to be
Freaks.
strange in this world. Yeah,
Freaks.
exactly. So again, that fits. Uh, but I really love his relationship that he has with Danny DeVito.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
because he,
What's cool about that is when I was watching it, because I didn't really remember how that part of the movie kind of played out. I loved, absolutely loved that Danny DeVito actually gave her or gave him her name because for
Mhm.
whatever reason, as I was watching it, like circus acts and like the carnies and the ring masters, they kind of in most movies get this like I don't know, malicious vibe almost like, they're going to turn on you. And even so, like with the whole contract thing, like, what indentured servitude is, or I forget what the other thing is, but he's like something about the contract. It's like
Mhm.
right there, you're introduced to him as like, oh, dang, like he's going to keep him captive and he's never going to find out who that girl is or whatever. And it
Yeah.
does kind of play with that a little bit, like every month just telling him like a little fact about her that is in the grand scheme of things like kind of meaningless, but the movie gives it meaning, like once he finally learns her name, it's like, oh, the fact that he told her about the flowers and the fact that he told her about that stuff is like why it works and he does all these cool things for him. So that was, playing with those expectations and kind of turning them on their head a little bit is pretty cool. Um, and I also love, I think, because of the fact that, the circus thing was introduced, another one of my favorite scenes is the ending scene where they're running towards the water after he gets out of the hospital. Because I love the fact that, he's like, oh, give me water the whole time. All throughout the movie, his throat is always parched. And he's always asking for, hey, like, do you want some water? Do you want something to drink or whatever? But then at the end of the movie, he's like, "Oh, do you have water?" And he gives him the bottle. And instead of drinking it, he pours it on himself. And I was like, "Oh, it's because he's gonna turn into a fish!" Like, yay!
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It kind of like plays with that stuff. So the fact that like seeing all those weirdos at the end as they're running past them to get him in the water, and I love the line like, "And everyone was there." Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's so touching. It's so touching. All those little beats from throughout the movie just kind of like culminating in that end scene is really nice.
Yeah. I know it is. It was really cool to see just that image of everybody from his past just
Yeah.
there all at once.
And
It
exactly
was,
how he imagined them rather than how they
mhm.
were. Like at the
Yeah.
funeral, you see how they actually were in real life, but in that last scene, it's like you're seeing them the way that he saw them. And I
Yeah.
I don't know. I love that. That whole concept really really hits home for me, like seeing the world in a different way than how it actually is.
Yeah. Oh man. Did you learn anything else regarding or yeah, did you learn anything else when you were watching the commentary or with it
I mean, there's a
with
there's a
commentary?
ton there's a ton of cool stuff that I think you learn about the commentary. The main things I think that stand out are some of the stuff that we already mentioned, which was
Yeah.
in the chat. Somebody mentioned that they actually built out that town. They filmed it mostly in Alabama. There's one scene I think that they mentioned that they filmed in France.
Oh.
Completely second unit kind of sort of a thing, but for the
Hmm.
most part the majority of the movie was filmed in Alabama. They built this town off the island or whatever. And I really appreciated seeing, in some of the other supplemental stuff, not necessarily the commentary, but just like Tim Burton's approach to the process. The sketches that he does ahead of the movies, the way that he designs all of the stuff in the movie for a very specific purpose. But also he gives a lot of, which is surprising because I think a lot of movies that are, or a lot of directors that are very creative in the same way that Tim Burton is. We've talked about like David Lynch, David Fisher, Fincher, and some of these guys that like,
Mhm.
do 100 takes or whatever to get
Yeah.
exactly what they want on the page. It was really surprising to me how much leeway he gives his actors and actresses and his crew and production designers. Like, the scene of Ed getting kind of wrapped up by those trees on the way to
Oh
Spectre.
yeah.
even that, like the way that they designed that, he kind of like drew some sketches and then gave it to Stan Winston Studios and was like, hey, like make this happen. And they just did some like wire maquettes or whatever of the trees and
Mm.
kind of filled them with styrofoam and stuff. So there'd be like leaves blowing around as it was happening or whatever. And he just let them kind of bring his vision to life,
Yeah.
and whatever changes they made to it, he was actually like really happy about. He even talks about how like Ewan McGregor liked to do, even if they feel like they got it on the first shot, they would sometimes do like 5 or 6 takes, um, because he wanted to see what the actors and actresses would like bring to it that he
Mhm.
maybe didn't initially envision or whatever. And then he'd just kind of pick, they'd pick their favorites out of them, but that they regularly would give them the opportunity to kind of go off script or to add something or shoot it a little differently, take a little different view of it. And that was just surprising to me to find out that somebody like Tim Burton, who has a very specific vision and a very specific style, is still like super collaborative. And he even mentions, like doing more than 5 or 6 takes is kind of like worthless or pointless because you're just wasting time when,
Yeah.
you have something like part of the process is creative. So that was pretty cool. I didn't realize that it was Marion Cotillard's first American film. I've seen her in a ton of
Oh,
stuff afterwards,
yeah.
and I didn't realize that. So yeah, it's a first U.S. American feature film that she was in. So
Yeah.
that was pretty interesting to me. Oh, I did find out. I don't know how true this is. I guess I didn't really look it up after the fact, but apparently, um, Brian Cox was originally cast as Ed Bloom.
Oh.
And so Danny Elfman gave the casting director a bunch of photos of Brian Cox, and she mistook him for Albert Finney.
No
So
way.
she offered the part to Albert Finney, thinking that he was Brian Cox.
I mean,
Um,
they kind of have a similar
They
aesthetic.
do. They do.
Similar. Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
They do. But that's just hilarious to me because then when they went to cast Ewan McGregor, one of the things that they said was that the casting process, some of the casting people were like surprised at how much Albert Finney and Ewan McGregor looked like Ewan. They thought Ewan McGregor looked like a younger version of him.
Mhm.
And so it's like, it kind of makes me think, because I looked up pictures of him and I don't necessarily agree. I don't actually think that they look very similar. Ewan McGregor has a much more like toothy, youthful grin than Albert Finney did. But
Yeah.
like, part of me wonders, like, did they think that maybe he looked like a younger version of Brian Cox? And that's like what they made that decision based on. And then she hired Albert Finney on that mistake. And so like that
Right.
whole thing, I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Who the heck knows? But
Yeah. And
um,
since we always try and tie all of our movies together, it is kind of cool seeing Albert Finney in this since we just saw him in Aaron Brockovich.
yeah. hmm
Um, so I was appreciative of that
Yeah,
because
I love seeing repeat appearances like that, especially since I'm not really
yeah,
familiar with his like body of work. So
me
seeing him and
neither.
stuff is
Yeah,
is pretty cool.
because that's really the only before this. It's really the only other thing I know him from is Aaron Brockovich, and I adore his character in Aaron Brockovich. It's he that movie's just great, and the performances are great, and he nails it. Because he it kind of fits though, because I don't know the way that Albert Finney speaks. He kind of mumbles, you
hmm
know. So this was definitely a little bit more fitting, being from
hmm
Alabama, than his role in Aaron Brockovich. But I still love both performances. They're great.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree, and I love the like it really to me fits the like storytelling style of Ed Bloom, like as he's
Mhm.
telling the stories, like the one about the parrots in the Congo when they're at the dinner table, and he's kind of like eating and slurring a little all at the same time, and it's
Right.
like it totally reminds me. Kelly mentioned she's like, this is my worst nightmare because at the scene after, like Marion Cotillard like says one sentence or whatever, and then he's like, oh, that reminds me, like blah blah blah, and he like goes off on this tangent. And I don't know, I thought it was funny and very fitting for him as an actor. She didn't even
Mhm.
realize he was British, so that also was kind of funny.
Oh, Albert Finney is.
I think so. He
Oh,
has like a British, isn't he? Let me double check that.
I've never researched that, so that could be very true.
I think he's British because in the behind the scenes footage he has Lancashire, England.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh wow. Okay.
um, very
Yeah,
interesting. But
I've only seen him with American English speaking roles.
well, there you go. He's just that good of an actor.
Dang. Kind of makes
I'm
me want to see what else he's done.
Yeah, yeah. I'm browsing through the IMDb, and apparently, the Brian Cox thing is listed in here under the trivia. So, producers at Sony wanted Brian Cox for the role of
Mm.
older Ed Bloom, but Denise Shyman, the casting supervisor, was given a photo. She mistook him for Albert Finney. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Here's a fun production fact. I don't see it on, or at least maybe not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, here, fun production fact that is not on IMDb. The scene in Korea where he parachutes down into the stage show or whatever, the fight scene that happens in the dark when he puts on the infrared goggles and turns the light off, was completely done that way because of budget constraints. There was originally supposed to be like a whole fight scene between them, but Tim Burton said that they were like coming up both on the schedule and the budget, and somebody in the production team was just like, what if we just like have him turn the lights off and fight him, and it happens completely off screen. And I actually thought that was really, really funny because, again, in kind of the movie's lens of like stories the way they factually happened versus the way that they're told, I love the unnecessary like flips back and forth and all the like pageantry of them like getting ready to fight him and everything.
Right.
And then he's just like, it reminds me very much of that scene in Indiana Jones where the sword fighter like does all that stuff and he's just like, so it's very, very, very funny. And I think if budget concerns were the reason that scene exists, it's awesome because to me that's a very memorable, humorous scene.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of also the gigantic fight scene that should have happened in the first Deadpool movie, that never actually came to pass. Again, because of budgetary reasons,
he forgot his guns.
Forgot his guns. Yeah. So
yeah,
a good way to get around that. which honestly, I think it's better for it, at least in Deadpool's case and in this case, because it makes it even funnier.
Yeah, well, and again, it just like serves the story better in terms of being an actual story. Like, how ridiculous that a superhero like Deadpool, who is known for guns, like forgets his guns.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny. It's really funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Well,
let's see. What
that's
else?
all I got personally, unless we want to go off on a tangent for another 30 minutes.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that really stood out to me, but just, I don't know. I appreciate this movie much more after this watch than any of the other ones.
Yeah. Cause like I'm with you. I don't think I've seen it since maybe 2004, 2005 when I saw it at home. Yeah. So I had forgotten quite a bit of it, but so much so that I could have sworn that like there was a lot more fantastical like CGI moments, but there really isn't. It's like the circus scene where time stops is pretty much the only like fairly CGI heavy scene. Just to make that happen where time stops and he's got to go through the people and through the hula hoop and
the funny thing about that is the majority of that scene isn't even CG. They actually had mimes come in to teach the people to stay still because that's real actors staying still. It's not like a freeze frame that they then animated him in. And on top of that, they actually gave Ewan McGregor kudos because I don't know if it was a technical limitation at the time, because I'm pretty sure motion controlled rigs existed when they filmed this movie, but that scene was not filmed with a motion control rig. It was a dude on a camera with essentially like a cart on his or riding in a cart with the camera on his shoulder doing that
Hmm.
pan, and they said that they had to film it multiple times, obviously, to get all the different like versions of that shot so that they
Yeah.
could stitch them together and composite them. And then there's like, the popcorn is obviously CG. There's
Mhm.
some stuff that's like in the air, like when people threw up. I think there's like a bowling pin that the juggler has or something like that.
Yeah.
That's obviously CG because they couldn't freeze that in real life or whatever.
Mhm.
But Ewan McGregor apparently was so close in every single scene, meaning that like the walk that he did, the way he tilted his head, when they overlaid them all on top of each other, it was almost perfect. That he literally
Wow.
recreated the walk. And I think they said they did it like 4 or 5 times to get the shot. But so four
Yeah.
or five times in a row, he pretty much nailed that shot almost exactly. And I just like, that blows my mind. Like thinking about
Yeah.
trying to do that and then masking stuff out to cut it, like what a cool shot to do. And a lot of it is just practical. It's just literally people
Yeah.
standing there holding their breath. I rewound it at one point to see if I could catch somebody like
Yeah,
moving
like just
slightly or
like
whatever.
barely
Yeah.
trembling or something.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
At
I
least
because
not that,
I did the same thing with the woman who's holding the hula hoop that he goes through. I
Mhm.
was like, oh, is she gonna move? Is she gonna
Yeah.
tremble? Nope.
That is a mistake. Just because you're calling out the woman with a hula hoop, that is a mistake because in the shot when time starts to stop, like when it
Hmm.
first slows down, she's holding the hula hoop at the top, but when he walks through it, she's
Uh,
holding it from the side.
yeah.
Only because when she was holding it from the top, like I don't know, they wouldn't be able to get him to like crawl through it because there's like a cable attached to him or something along those lines. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly what it was, but
Yeah.
she's holding it on the side when he actually walks through. And even the concept of time catching up afterwards, like that's such a cool shot too.
Hmm.
That whole thing is just phenomenal. Really, really well done.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was blown away at how much practical
Hmm.
in-camera effects were actually happening. Because in my mind, the 20 years ago, whatever, when I saw it for the first time, I could have sworn that there was a lot of CGI, but no,
Yeah.
apparently not.
It also reminded me too, only because it's like top of mind. But if you read my post recently that I wrote about Psycho and movie showtimes and things like that, I've
Yeah.
been playing Red Dead Redemption. I started with the first Red Dead Redemption, and then I've been playing the second one now. And this movie actually reminds me a lot of the feeling. You know how like when you think about like old video games or things that you did as a kid, and you remember them at like such a high fidelity that sometimes like when you go back and revisit those things, you're like, oh wow, this is way rougher than I remembered it.
Yeah.
When I think about Red Dead Redemption, the first one anyway, like to me it feels like a western, and I picture it as like super high quality graphics, and like it's like way better in my head than I pictured it. And so like playing it, I feel like the first Red Dead Redemption, actually playing it feels rougher than I remembered it. But to me, that just fits in with this movie and like speaks to the quality of the story and the implementation and the choices that were made, that I remember it so much better than it is in reality. Because to
Hmm.
me, that kind of speaks to like the point of this movie, that like your memory gives so much flavor to the things that you remember. And this movie is like one of those things. I don't remember a lot of the rough CG stuff. And even like it is a practical effect, but the fish, when he catches the fish, it's like an
Yeah.
animatronic fish.
Right.
It kind of like watching it now seems hokey, but I remembered that scene. I remembered him like struggling with the fish and having it cough up his wedding ring or whatever.
Hmm.
And my memory of that was so much better than actually seeing it on the screen. Like I was a little
Right.
disappointed of it when I
Right.
saw it, because it's like, yeah, it's cool because it's a practical effect and it looks pretty good for
Hmm.
the most part. But like you could totally tell it's an animatronic fish. The
Yeah.
styling of it is awesome. It feels very Tim Burton-y, but it's a little rough. It's like a little choppy. And the lion, that's another example. Like
Yeah.
the lion, I remember that scene, but now when I watched it, I was like, oh dang, that is like very clearly an animatronic tiger
Yeah.
that looks like it came off of a ride from Disneyland, like
Right.
roar,
Uh-huh.
roar, roar. Like it's just not. It's not the same.
Yeah, I know. It's funny how our brains just kind of fill in those gaps or enhance things
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
You
Yeah.
just remember them with like higher fidelity than they
Mhm.
were, and I don't
I
know.
mean, like a few months ago, I played uh, GoldenEye,
Mm-hmm.
The N64 GoldenEye,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew even back then in the '90s that it was, still based on polygons. There was no like ray tracing or whatever they have nowadays, but like I just remembered it as like these fluid movements, and it was just the greatest multiplayer, first
You
person
picture Pierce
shooter of all.
Brosnan as James Bond, but then you play the game again. It's like
Yeah,
his head is literally a square or like a
right.
rectangle.
And even the movements were so clunky, and I was like, "Oh my god, how I really thought this." I mean, at the time, yes, it really was one of the greatest games and wildly popular, especially amongst, teenage boys like I was at the time.
Yeah.
But wow, nowadays it is rough.
To that
So,
point, have you played the GoldenEye remake? Are you
no,
familiar with that at all? So
no.
when Casino Royale came out and Daniel Craig became James Bond,
Mhm.
I don't remember the name of the studio. I can probably look it up if it's important to anybody. But they remastered GoldenEye. They did a full remaster of it with Daniel Craig as James
Oh,
Bond. But the
yeah.
story is exactly the same, or for the most part, exactly the same as the GoldenEye story from the film. And I actually prefer, like, when I go back now playing through GoldenEye, I've played through the original N64 version all the way through as an adult more recently, but I also
Mhm.
play the Daniel Craig one, and I actually like that one better because the quality of life stuff feels more like what I remember the original GoldenEye being like.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
when I played the N64 version, like even the idea of how you aim at stuff, how there's like that rubber band effect, like it always tries to center you back when you're trying
Right.
to aim at shit, is like so infuriating, especially in some of the levels where you're like in close quarters and you have to turn
Yeah.
around really quick to like luckily the bad guy's aim is super terrible, so like it's very forgiving in how you play it. But like the remake of GoldenEye feels like what I thought the game was like when I was playing it back in the
Yeah.
day, you know? And even like the split screen multiplayer and stuff, like it was so awesome. I remember playing with my friends and, doing like slappers only and how much fun we had.
Uh-huh.
And like now when you go back and play it, it's like, oh my God, the improvements that they've made in games since then really make it apparent how rough those games were back in the day.
Yeah, dude.
Like, and again, I love old games. Doom is my
Uh-huh.
favorite game of all time. So like I love playing the original Doom. But like when you play some of those older like third person games, especially
Yeah.
compared to how they are like now in modern times, it's like, oh man, they really are how I remembered them rather than how they were,
Mhm.
you know.
I know. It's definitely, the quality has definitely advanced quite a bit in the last, what, 30 years?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well,
Jeez.
and even like there's some I recently replayed like the Tomb Raider. They did a kind of a remaster of Tomb Raider, but what's really cool about the Tomb Raider remaster is that there's one button and it swaps between the original game like as it was and then
Mm.
the remastered version. So like the textures are all much nicer, the character models are like higher polygon counts and stuff like that. And you
Mhm.
literally it's one button and it's instant. It's you can swap at any time that you're playing if you want to play it the way that it was originally released. Like you just hit
Yeah.
the button and it goes right back to that. I wish more games did that because it kind of helps you appreciate, I think, what was
Yeah.
groundbreaking about those games without forcing you to go through those like technical limits. Like imagine watching a movie like Big Fish and being able to hit a button and swap between like modern CG and how it was originally, like you might pick
Yeah.
up on those two things. And I don't know. I appreciate when games do that. I wish more of them did it because playing through Tomb Raider with some of those like modern conveniences, it's like really, really cool because I think that going back to the conversation that you and Brad and I had about like directors messing with older films to try
Mhm.
and like modernize them. I genuinely feel that like some of these remakes of games are really the product that those initial game designers wanted to make, but were
Yeah.
held back by the technical limits of the time.
Right.
Which is why I don't necessarily fault people like James Cameron who, go through and denoise their movies or whatever, because like if that wasn't a thing, I guarantee you James Cameron probably would not have filmed, on film. If he had perfect digital quality, everything, he would have done that back in the day. But that's different from AIing stuff like True Lies and crap, or
Mhm.
like George Lucas going and changing the narrative of a movie after the fact. Like
Yeah.
that's a little bit much. Yeah, Duppy, Mist and Riven. Yeah, that's a great example of that. They literally redid, and what's cool about Mist and Riven is they redid all of the graphics, but again with the original assets as the base. So they
Oh, cool.
literally start with the original and built on top of it. They like added more detail to stuff, but all the shapes and essential like physical sizes of it are exactly the same. So it's really really well done. It like preserves
Wow.
the character of the original, kind of like what we were talking about with Alice in Wonderland too.
Mhm.
Going back to the original concept artwork from Alice in Wonderland, you're not changing the intent of the original creators. If anything, you're trying to get closer to what they probably intended when they made it, but couldn't because stuff just wasn't as good. It wasn't as capable back then.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, I don't know if you've caught in the chat, Steve is saying that people are going to remake everything with AI because it's so good now. But I think if you go if you go back and watch, we've had a couple of conversations about AI. I think that is even though it does happen, I'm not necessarily in favor of that because again, you're using other people's work to create something that you want. Which kind of betrays maybe the intent of the creators initially. So I don't know how much of that I would be in favor of.
Yeah.
Duppy, I did, but briefly. I did not watch the whole thing. I didn't watch the whole Jan Svank Major Alex. I saw it on YouTube and kind of like flipped through some of the stuff, and
Mhm.
I kind of like what they were attempting, what they were doing with it, because it kind of has this like weird, grotesque nature to it. But
Yeah.
I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't sit down and watch it from start to finish. I'd plan to. It is on my watch list, but I have not had the chance to watch it all the way through. Okay, I got one more question because we are at past our hour mark. This is something that I was thinking about, not really a commentary on the movie or anything like that. I noticed Danny Elfman is in this movie. Or not Danny Elfman, Tim Burton is in this movie. He has a cameo as one of the circus performers in that scene where Danny
Oh,
DeVito becomes the werewolf.
yeah.
And when I watched it the first time, I thought it was him, but wasn't sure because it didn't. He's like bald
Is he one of the
instead of.
clowns?
He's one of the circus performers that's sitting at the table. I don't know if they're playing cards or dominoes or
Yeah.
whatever, but he's sitting at the table when the wolf jumps out of the
Right.
trailer as they like disperse. And IMDb confirmed it. Somebody else wrote on there that it is in fact Tim Burton. So my question is, I don't really remember or know, and this is probably pure ignorance because if I'm being honest, I didn't really like pay attention for this or haven't really thought that it was something that Tim Burton did. But does Tim Burton have any other cameos in his movies? Like this is the first movie that I remember or that I spotted a Tim Burton cameo. Like
That's a great question.
him making an appearance in the movie, and just
Yeah.
from a selfish perspective, I love when directors and people do that, especially when it's something that doesn't really necessarily have like I don't like when directors or producers or whoever give themselves cameos where they have like lines because most of them
Yeah.
aren't very good actors
Right.
necessarily. So I like it more when they're kind of like in the background, and especially like where in this case he had to get full on made up to be the character that he is in the cameo. So like
Mhm.
that's kind of cool to me when they put themselves in there. And like Hitchcock used to do that a lot. He used to have like cameos where he's kind of like in the backgrounds of his movies and stuff. So it made me wonder, does Tim Burton have other cameos?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he may have had like a small cameo in the Wednesday series because we had just watched that
Oh
with my
yeah.
girls. But even then, now I'm second guessing myself. Maybe I just made that up. But as far as films go, I yeah, I don't know. I could see, if anything, I could see him possibly having another cameo in Planet of the Apes because he's in like a bunch of makeup and you don't really know it's him.
Hmm.
Maybe he's uncredited, but yeah.
Oh yeah, see that would be a perfect one. Like if he's in full on, is he in Planet of the Apes? Do you know that, or you're
That
just saying like?
I don't know that.
Oh
I'm
yeah, see
just
that would be
guessing.
awesome. That's like
Yeah.
an amazing cameo if there's something like that in there because that's exactly the type of cameos that I like.
Yeah.
You know, like
Where you
integrate
don't
them
know
into
it's
the
them.
world. Yeah, integrate them into the world, put them into the place, but don't like highlight them. Like
Right.
somebody knows what he looks like and they can spot him, awesome. But don't put him front and center and do that kind of thing.
I think one of the greats who likes to do this quite often is Peter Jackson, because
Hmm.
he puts himself a few times throughout the entire trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, and
Yeah,
most of the time it's him getting killed, which is great.
yeah.
So I
Well, it's
really
funny
like
because
that.
it reminded me of, like in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the when they put Pee-wee into his own movie and like the two actors are like getting closer and he's like constantly trying to be in there. Like that's the type of stuff I hate. So I loved the fact that Pee-wee like parodied that and like pointed that out because that's exactly the type of example that I'd be like, great. I love that the director's in the movie, but he's objectively ruining that scene for
Hmm.
anybody that doesn't know that that's the director. Is like, why is this freaking weirdo in this scene? And like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, if they're getting killed or you don't really, yeah, if they're not a highlight or part of the spotlight of a particular scene, if they're just kind of in the background, I much more prefer that. Because then it's like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
he's pointing at the TV. Then you're like, hey, that's the director. I see him.
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Well, and that's the other thing is like, IMDb usually tells you like in the what section is it? I don't know if it's in the trivia section or like if there's a connection section or something, but they usually tell you when there's like a cameo from somebody notable in a movie. But I don't know that there's a place where you can actually just like click on Tim Burton and see which movies he's cameoed in. I mean, unless it's like listed as actor on his, IMDb page.
Mhm.
Is it? Okay, he's got actor credits. Hold on, let me clear all these out.
And they're all in Law and Order SVU.
Okay, so in Pee-wee, he was a thug in the alleyway, uncredited.
Mm.
So probably in that scene where they're like, "Hey, you're new around here. You're a stranger. Get out of
Right.
here." I guess he's in Hoffa, but I don't think did he direct that? No, Danny DeVito directed
Oh,
that. Okay, so I don't
yeah.
know. It doesn't. I don't know that there's any place, or maybe he just didn't do cameos in other movies. But I don't know that
Mhm.
there's like a website or a place where you can find cameos, a list of cameos that people did in their own movies.
Hey, there's your million-dollar idea.
Yeah, let me get right on that.
Create a website for that.
Watch IMDb adds it tomorrow. They're like, "Hey, Jeff Bezos is like, we can't have him taking our money.
That's a good idea.
We got to take
Yoink.
that. We got to steal it. Nice
Go.
fucking model."
In a PG movie.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have on Big Fish. I don't see I don't have any other notes on the movie that I took unless we want to go through the rest of this IMDb trivia.
Well, the only other thing I want to mention to the audience, those who are watching this or listening to this, um, Derek put out a really cool article on our Substack that you all should read. I
Thanks.
will shamelessly plug that because it was really interesting. It was something that I didn't know about how Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, was the very first movie to mandate that start times would be a thing.
Well, show times. So
Show times, yes.
and there's a little bit of like, I don't want to say controversy, but there's some like discussion about it because back in the days, before the 1960s, like from the late 1800s to early stuff, road shows were like a thing where essentially they would come, like literally a production would come set up at a theater with their film and stuff like that. And so they would have start times for the movie, but essentially once the movie started, it just played on a loop.
Yeah.
So you could come in at any point after that. You bought a ticket, and your ticket basically gave you admission for that entire day to see the movie. And so you could walk in the middle of the movie, watch it to the end, stay for the next showtime to watch the beginning that you missed. It was called running backwards, is essentially what they called it. Is that you could come in at any point, stay through the next one, and see it all the way until the end. And even then, if you got to the point where you walked in at the beginning, you could still keep watching the movie if you wanted to. There was no like mandate that like you had to leave.
Yeah.
So what Hitchcock really did, and again, there were other movies in France and stuff, but this was the first mainstream movie in the US that dictated show times, meaning when you bought your ticket, it wasn't a ticket for admission into the theater. It was a ticket for that specific movie, starting at that specific time and ending at the time that it ended,
Yeah.
So once the movie was over, they cleared the auditorium. The theater owners would go in and push people out and be like, yep, your showtime is done. Go leave. And that just was like not really like a standard. There were theaters throughout the US that did that, but that was up to individual theaters to do that, because a lot of the theater owners would like buy the rights to play a movie, or they would buy the actual reel for a movie, and then they wanted to get as many tickets sold as they possibly could, So some of them did say like, oh, we've got 2 showtimes. It starts at 2:45, and then we've got like a B movie that plays in between them, which is where the term B movie comes from. And then, back to the secondary movie starts at, like 9:45 or whatever. But again, in between that movie was just looping over and over and over again. They didn't force you to leave. They didn't force you to show up on time. You could show up whenever you wanted. And from what I understand, even the phrase, oh shoot, there's like a kind of a cliche phrase that comes from that concept of like, and that's when I came in. Oh yeah, I think it's, and that's when I came in. Like that's where it comes from, is
yeah.
When you tell somebody like, oh, I gotta leave, well, this is where I come in. That literally was because this is the part that I showed up for at the movie, so now I've seen the whole movie.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And again, it's interesting that this whole idea came about because you were playing Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah. Well, it's such a cool game. Like there's so much detail in that game that I honestly just can't, 'cause, like even when we're talking about movies, I'm constantly thinking about what it takes to produce that movie. Like just the idea of, let's take a small piece of this movie and figure out like, how would you accomplish this from start to finish if you wanted to put this on film to do that. And so like when I'm playing video games, even I think about a lot what it takes to make something like that happen. Like the obvious example is voice actors. When you're playing, when you're playing an open-ended game that's something like Red Dead Redemption, where the player can choose to go into various scenarios or various situations, and then even within those situations, they have multiple choices that they can make for things that they say or ways that they react or what they do or don't do. A voice actor has to film all those different possibilities.
Yeah.
So even just like getting a script that is robust enough to account for all those different possibilities, and then to get a voice actor in there to do all those different permutations and combinations of things is like really awesome to me. Okay. But then I look at a game like Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto, like Rockstar Games is really like one of the best at this. But that game has so many things that they include in there just for detail's sake, which when I'm talking about that, I'm thinking about like letters that you find throughout the world. Literally, you stumble upon a shack in the middle of the wilderness. It's like a little house. You walk in, there's a bunch of dead bodies. and then there's like letters that like tell the lore of like what happened in that situation. And the part that gets me about stuff like that is how many people play that game. There's probably millions of people that have played that game, but if you play it on a platform like Steam, for example, sometimes there are like achievements or awards that you get for doing certain things in the game. And some of them, it's like 8% of players did this, you know? So like I think about that and I'm like, okay, so out of all the stuff they added in this game, 8% of people took this path in the story or did this thing or discovered this thing or whatever, okay? Now you have content that like is what I'm talking about. The movie theater, the Lantern Film movie theater in Red Dead Redemption is a full fucking movie that they made that plays on repeat, so you can go back later in the game, later in the day, days later, and sometimes it's playing that same movie, sometimes it's playing a different movie. There's like an actual vaudevillian theater that you can go into that has like acts that they do. There's like a magician, there's a bullet catcher, there's a snake charmer lady, there's a fire eater, you know, like all this stuff. And all I can think about is the fact that like they made not only like one show, but multiple shows and multiple variations of the shows, so that if like 0.5% of the players cared enough to go sit in this theater and watch it, it's not the same show every time. It's not the same performers in the same order. It's not the same performer doing the same act. If you, the bullet catch is a great example of it. The bullet catch act, if you go into the theater and watch the bullet catch, at one point, the guy in the audience yells out like, "Oh, that's a fake gun. It's shooting blanks or whatever." The performer will invite somebody from the audience to bring their gun onto stage and shoot it at his mouth to prove that it's a real bullet or whatever. And you as the player can be that person that walks up. So if you don't walk up, the game will have somebody else from the audience walk up and do that or whatever. But you as the player can actually walk up into the spotlight and be the person that shoots at them. And you can shoot them in the leg. Right. So instead of shooting them in the, if you shoot him in the mouth, he'll catch the bullet. But if you shoot him in the leg, he will fall to the ground screaming and the curtains close. They had to plan that shit out. Right. They had to record the voice line of the dude in the audience that yells like, "That's a fake." Like, oh, for the just on the off chance that a player decides to go watch that show, like none of the story requires you to go see that show. Mm-hmm. There's no point in the game where you're forced to see that show. Actually, I shouldn't. There's one part where you can go and take a character on a date to go see that show, but you only have to do it once, so you don't ever have to come back and see the repeat performances or see any of that stuff. But they had to do that. The animators had to animate all the characters. The voice actors had to record the lines for that. The script had to call for all the different variations that you as the player could potentially take. You can applaud or you can antagonize them in the show. It's like, holy crap. Just the amount of effort and time and thoughtfulness and detail they put into that, like, is insane. So I was playing the game and, you know, I was just like, I can't believe they did all this. And I was like, but, you know, they did make one mistake, which was that eventually, you know, if you go to the movie theater, it's playing the same movie all throughout the day. You could leave, come right back, and it's the same movie. And no, it turns out that's how it worked too. So even they thought about that, you know, like that was very intentionally done. And I mean, yeah, it really saved them some time that's how things were made. But that's why, because back in the day, it saved people time. They didn't have the time, money, or resources to make a brand new movie. In fact, Janet Leigh, there's a book that I read some like snippets of for the research on that article. Janet Leigh talks about like various things of, you know, about what happened in the movies and stuff. And one of the things that is mentioned in there and in another movie history book is that at the time before Psycho, a lot of movie studios would literally produce one movie for the whole year. So that was their that was their thing, and they would try to, I mean, literally shop it around to as many places as they could because that was their only opportunity to make money on that movie. And then even in the 1960s, in its heyday, any given movie theater would play definitely less than, 365 days a year or whatever. They might get like a third of that where it was like a unique movie because they were trying to get the money that they paid for these movies back so much that they would keep them going for as long as they possibly could.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Fun stuff. I didn't know that. I was one of the 10,000 people that learned that fact during the day. So I just thought it was cool and I wanted to share.
Yeah. Hiddenmovieclub.substack.com. That's where you can find Derek's article. Read it. It's very interesting. Because you didn't even tell me that you were doing it. So it just kind of showed up and I was like, hey, this is cool.
I will tell you, I just got my copy of Warrior, my Steelbook. They finally released the movie Warrior in 4K. I started writing a breakdown of it a while ago, but when I found out that they were going to be releasing it in 4K this year, I kind of just saved that in the drafts folder. But now that it's out, I'm going to be watching that. So I'll be doing a breakdown of some of Warrior 2 and posting it on there. We also have other places that you can engage with us on socials. You can always comment on YouTube, comment on the Substacks. We technically have a subreddit that you can comment on. Haven't really been updating that because we didn't get too much stuff, but engage with us. I love talking about movies, obviously. So, if there's something you guys want to see, if you know a fun fact and you want to kind of introduce that to us as a concept for a future essay or anything like that, I'm totally open to that. I love learning about movies and about the filmmaking and production processes. So if there's cool stuff like that, send them to me and maybe I'll write an article about it or an essay.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us during this live stream. Thanks for watching on demand later on if you are doing it that way. Thanks for listening to the audio only version via your favorite podcatcher.
We'll be doing Moonlight this week for after the credits.
Yeah, next week we are doing Moonlight. Hopefully Brad can join us next week. Next Tuesday, we're pretty much going to try and stick with this time slot, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays. So hopefully that works out for the better of you. So, hiddenmovieclub.oh. We did swap. Oh, that's right. You're normally on the left.
Yeah.
Maybe because I showed up before you this time.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. It's not intentional. We did it just to mess with you, Deppy.
Sorry.
Anyway, thanks, guys. We'll be covering movie Moonlight next time. And, jump in on Substack, become a paid subscriber on YouTube, because we do our giveaways. I've sent out a couple chat messages on Substack to people that have won those, and sometimes they respond and sometimes they don't. All that means is that somebody else is going to get the opportunity to get a free physical copy of a movie. So let's make it happen.
So do it. Yeah. And if you join for free with our Hidden Movie Club Substack, you obviously get the weekly newsletter as well, knowing what we are going to be watching. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks, Cinco. Thanks, Steve Nori. Thanks, Kadurdima. Thanks,
Duppy.
Did Craig make it for this one? Thanks, everybody who showed up. We love you guys all.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye. Have a great week.